welcome to Artist Express. I'm sure you're noticing that we have a different configuration on our set today, and that is in deference to our guest, David Olson, a visual artist who lives and works here in Salina. So to get us started, David, how about you talk a little bit about your art practice and why we're sitting on the floor?
Well, we're sitting on the floor because that's how I go about making my artwork. I find that my body works better in response to the materials that I use by being able to use my upper body as a way to move. As a practitioner of yoga, I've also found that that sense of movement and mindfulness also then helps me to work. And the example would be when I'm cutting my paper, as I do use paper, I can find that I can use my upper body to come into play and work. Whereas if I'm at a table, it'll be my arms that are extended over the surface, and I find that that is not readily conducive to flowing.
Right.
Whereas here I can get my whole body involved with what I'm wanting to work with in the forms that I'm seeing. And the paper, I also find, works well for me on the floor because I have a very, very flat surface to go with.
Right.
And the nature of paper allows that kind of flow to happen. Why do I work in paper? Decades ago, as a trained sculptor, I would do a lot of work in metal and then also do a lot of work in wood. And being a frugal kind of person, I found that I would be making paper patterns.
Yes.
And in order to lay the patterns onto steel plates, steel sheets, planks of wood, and then arrange it, get the wood grain the way I'd want it to work, or know how I was going to cut it on the steel, and then take the paper patterns off and then go about working. And then I've had these piles of paper patterns. I would say selectively stacked paper patterns. And the more in my practice as a sculptor, or as I'd like to say, the more mature I became as a practicing studio artist, I gave myself permission, it seemed, to, well, let's think about paper as being a form for me to use with my expressions. And then also being a student of art history, I can think of Japanese prints, Chinese prints, art of Asia that are centuries old. We can think about Egyptian papyrus, centuries old. And yet, that morning, I would throw paper away.
Right.
Or recycle it, depending.
Yes.
And so, here was a material that was long-lasting and yet also fragile. And so that it got to be analogous to an aspect of life. And it's like, I can do this because as a sculptor, and being trained with a multi-material approach to sculpture, representing an aspect of what life is like being multi-avenued, it's like, I can do this. And then I began wanting to do it.
Yes.
And an interesting thing then happened is that when I began working with paper, I was also getting my practice with yoga, which helped with mindful meditation. And so I then found that by working with the paper, I could go into the same kind of practices and attitudes that was happening within the mental meditation of being responsive to working material and form, and then being able to use my body to move and manipulate. Earlier paper pieces probably represented more of a flowing form of the body, not so much recognizable as it was the sense of movement.
Right.
And now it's more like punctuations of thought, it seems, when the works are coming. Because as you know, as an artist, we grow in the material. You grow in the manipulation. Things become revealing when that happens, especially if you reference how that growth happens for us. And I was sensing that happening for me. So why do I sit on the floor? It's my practice. It's the biggest space I have, and if I drop something, it doesn't go very far.
Now, have you retained the materials and equipment necessary for metal and wood sculpture, or have you pretty much made the transition to paper?
I still have some tools. Again, with working with paper for the last couple decades, I've definitely emphasized that.
Have moved
also.
to that.
I have done commission work, public work. I've also then designed that public work and then went and sought fabricators that would then work with me.
Right.
And then they were using their fabrication tools, fabric studios to go about.
You don't have to have that as long as you have the image in mind, or the...
That's very true.
Right.
And one of the last pieces I did was made out of stainless steel, 10 feet tall. It's in McPherson, Kansas, on one of the campuses for disability support to the Great Plains. And it's a memorial garden. And I actually did a paper form that was the exact length and height and what the work was going to be. Took those to the fabricator. They laid them out on the stainless steel sheets to figure out how to cut it.
Heavy duty, yeah. Well, I saw that on your website, and I think it's beautiful, and I'm glad you told me the name of the organization, because I was trying to figure out
GP.
Yeah, what that meant.
DSGP, Disability Support to the Great Plains.
Right, and that's in McPherson.
McPherson and also Hutchinson, Kansas.
Oh, yes, I did know that. They've just recently
opened
expanded.
up a larger studio space.
That's
yes.
great.
Yeah.
Now, have you worked solely as an art maker throughout your professional life, or have you fulfilled other roles as well?
I've done other roles as well. The idea of me being an object maker, an art maker, has been something that's been with me since I was in second semester, 7th grade, in, at that time, Salina Junior High School South. And in fact, it was Deanna Horse who was my art teacher at that time.
I know her well.
And there was a change that happened. My mind saw that there was a sense of communication, there was a sense of accomplishment, and there was also that discovery and seeing what can happen. That led the path where I want creativity to always be something in my life.
Yes.
So undergraduate school, Bethany College, with a studio arts major, and then that was a Bachelor's of Arts degree. Did a Master of Arts degree at Eastern Illinois University in Charleston, Illinois. That was for a Master of Arts in Sculpture, because I was finding myself getting to be more dimensionally oriented. And then I also did a Master of Fine Arts degree at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. And upon graduation from Carbondale, within probably 9 months, I was teaching at Wichita State University.
Ah, so you're an educator as well.
And that because of the art.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say that was definitely a mechanism where I found that, one, being concerned about visual literacy and what visual literacy and visual communication can mean, and also to expand that sense of conversation. Teaching lent itself well to it, along with the discipline of having time, and then be able to have the exchange with other artists. It's definitely a discipline where you engage.
Right.
There's not a right or a wrong, not necessarily a black or a white, but it's colorful. And there's that kind of relationship that exists because of you're trying to have a sense of communication that happens where words may not grab what we want, but the sensations, the sensual experiences of working and manipulating material does have that communication.
Yes.
And generally for us, especially in the last several decades, art schools have been a way to have that happen for us.
Yes.
So I have been in education, have taught full-time at Wichita State University and Newman University, adjuncted at Bethany College, and also at Newman University, all the while maintaining a studio practice.
Right.
That's always been there for me, being able to have that kind of manipulation. In some ways, it's just like working with life. Things intertwine and things ever move around.
And they're connected.
And they're, yes, thank you. Yeah. And they are connected, certainly.
I have a great fondness for any image that illustrates the connectedness because you can't get away from it. Whether
Right,
we believe
right.
we are or not, we definitely are. Now, you were talking about communication as well, and I'm curious, do you title your pieces?
I do title them, but the title is never in front of me when I'm working on the work.
Right.
And I would say never is an appropriate word with that. It always happens after the fact.
When you see it.
When I see it and when it's done, and sometimes after a while that it's
Yes.
been done. And then it's a reflection on what that is at that time. I've often think about my work when I'm making pieces is that it's a conversation, that it's analogous to maybe how jazz is thought of, the music. There's a question answer that happens, or a question
call
gets
and
asked,
response,
and
yeah.
then you make, thank you, and then you make the response. And so it's like for me, in a number of these works that I have here, I'll make the basic form, the larger form, that's the question.
Yeah.
And then it's like, now let's see how it responds, and you go through the flow of it. And oftentimes it is a rhythm. I'm thinking within that rhythm of what the work's going to be for me. When I do that, I want to say that it's important for me to become contemplative and being mindful of the form, where I try to look at what I am then doing at that moment. I'm not trying to think about where I'm trying to get it to, nor am I thinking about where it has been, but it's the response of being in that moment.
Yes.
Some visual artists who I like to relate to sometimes call it being mindful of your moment. And I can very much appreciate being mindful in your moment.
Right, yeah. Now, what kind of conversations have you, has your work generated? What kind of questions does the viewer ask you when they are looking at your work?
When I'm around and I'm privileged to hear that conversation, I usually find it's people who also have a sense of what it means to be quiet, to have a sense of calmness that they wish to come about in their life. It seems, because they're talking to me about how it allows them to feel. They will go, can I touch it? And then they'll go, oh, that's paper. And yet they'll flex it a little bit, they'll feel it. And it just, you could tell there's something that's happening, that they're enjoying that. So I find that people who appreciate my work, who wish to collect it or own it, or just to look at it and just to have the conversation, it's one of where they sense a kind of mindfulness. They like that in their lives also.
Yes.
It seems more often than not, they take time to look at things around them too. They may not necessarily be artists, but I also feel that all people are creative.
I agree.
You know, it's part of what makes us as human beings, is we may call it problem solving. That's creativity.
That's creativity, absolutely.
And so I'm a big proponent for it. Please do that.
David, we're out of time. It went really quickly. There's so much to see. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing your thoughts and your process. Please be sure to go to David's website to see more of his work. He has videos that really illustrate the process. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.